Now it says the broadcast is live.
All right. Are we live here?
It says we are. There's a little box above your head that says live.
All right. Well, I would say welcome, welcome. I'm not seeing that this is being live here, but I'm going to trust that we are. But in any event, all right. Well, welcome, welcome to this live broadcast. And if you are tuning in after the broadcast, welcome, welcome. I have the great privilege of sitting down here with my good friend and fellow real estate agent out in the Buffalo, New York area, Joyce Grinewich. And Joyce and I are going to be talking today about the market, the market from a buyer's perspective. And there's so much misinformation out there. There's so much information, negative information. And the question we keep getting, from buyers is, do I buy now or do I wait? And, what happens if I wait? What's going to happen with the market? Is the bubble going to burst? Am I going to regret buying? Am I going to regret not buying? And, I think there's a lot of buyers out there that are in this conundrum, first time home buyers and move up or downsizers alike, that are just kind of stuck and they just don't know what to do. So that's what we're going to talk about today. And Joyce, so I'm going to throw you right under the bus and we're going to skip right to the end. It's going to be the shortest broadcast ever. So what's the answer? Should they buy now or wait?
They should always enter into it, especially for buyers that are renting.
Perfect.
The
Perfect.
average cost of renting in our area is anywhere between $14,000 and $16,000 a year spent on rent. And that's an awful lot of money to just give to pay for somebody else's property. So while it is a challenge to get offers accepted in this very competitive market here in Buffalo, our inventory is extremely low. So many buyers get disappointed time and time again, but you have to keep trying and you have to keep working at it, because to wait until next year, it's only more money that you're paying in rent to somebody else and not
Absolutely.
your own equity gain.
So that's it. So that's the end of our broadcast. That's the answer. End of story, right? If it were only that easy. And I guess I wanted to start there, Joyce, is kind of like talking about, the market and where the market sits and kind of, what we're seeing. And for certain, I think we're seeing very much the similar type of market conditions with, an earlier spring market. We're hoping for an earlier spring market, and what's going to happen in terms of this year. Typically a spring market starts, in the big, middle end of February, right, beginning of March, and the experts were predicting that to be, a little bit earlier. For certain. What are you guys seeing out in your area?
Right now, uh, the buyers are out. If a listing comes on the market, there was one on Saturday, an open house, and the line of people waiting to see it went down the block. So the buyers are out there. They're wanting, to make this happen. So um, I'm just hoping that we can increase our listing inventory. And we're doing everything we can to um, make sellers aware that this is indeed a prime time to be putting your house and entering into the seller's market and taking advantage of it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we're seeing, I had a client a couple weeks ago that made an offer, from afar, from moving from into this area from out of state. They were very, very aggressive. And, we're talking, middle of January, typically a slower time period. House came on the market. It was the right house for them. They, made a super, super strong offer, went in guns blazing, and they barely got it, and they barely got it. And, I think that, the one of the things that I wanted to talk about today is kind of that mindset of, the pricing of things. And, there's a lot of fear of, buying too high and, spending too much on a property, and what happens if you've paid too much on the property and so forth. And, I kind of wanted to debunk that whole idea, I had a conversation actually just this afternoon with a client, and they were looking at buying a piece of property that they're not under the gun. They're not in a situation where they have to buy something, but they want to make an investment. They want to they want to buy this second home, which will ultimately be their primary residence. And the conversation that we had was such that, getting into the market now, what happens if she gets in and then a year from now, 2 years from now, her husband, they decide to not hold on to the property? Well, they could sell it and make money off the deal. Sell it and walk away, cover their purchasing expenses, and then some, because there's so much data that supports that growing market, that appreciating market, and that for certain, like the data doesn't lie, in terms of what we're seeing and what the experts are seeing, and whatnot. Do you agree?
Absolutely. Absolutely. The values of property will certainly not be depreciating. They will be decelerating. They won't be going up in price as much as they did, at least here in the last year and a half, 2 years, but they're certainly not going to depreciate. We don't,
Right.
none of the experts, and I can see it here, that the housing prices are going to hold. This is very different than 2008, and that's what everybody's all
Yes.
comparing this to. That was a mortgage crisis. This is nothing like that at all. So this is completely different, and I don't see the value of the properties decreasing one bit.
No, and you're absolutely right. I mean, I read an article recently that kind of approached that exact, and if I could find, having some technical issues on my end, but that's okay. We'll roll with it here if I could pull up the article. But that was the thing, is that the 2008 was a mortgage issue. We have an inventory issue, which
Correct.
is not, an inventory issue is not going to cause a bubble to burst. It's not going to
No.
cause the market to collapse. And the one thing that I was reading about earlier this week, which was something that we know, in terms of like predicting what, like you know um, the buyer populations, and the last 10 years we were talking about like the baby boomers coming in, right? And I'm sure you've probably seen it as well, with a lot of downsizers. A lot of those baby boomers, their kids are grown and they want to get into second homes or smaller homes and whatnot. But the market that's coming, that is of age, are the millennials. And the millennials is like, that's the millennials are bigger than Gen X and baby boomers combined, and they're of age, and those buyers are starting to buy houses, right? So you've got all of these buyers coming in. You've got the buyers that would normally buy anyways, and then those baby boomers that are still doing the downsizing. But now you've got this huge conglomerate of millennials coming in. It doesn't make any sense for anyone to think that, when the experts say that the market's going to be holding steady, with continued appreciation. There's a reason for that, with all these factors in place. It's with the lending environment, and I think we talked about this too, is in terms of the lending, the mortgage process. And this is another key element. I'm glad you brought that up, because the mortgage process was so,
Oh,
was flying
absolutely.
loose, right? It's hard now. You
Mm-hmm.
can't just walk in
No.
and get a mortgage. You can't
Right.
just say, okay, well, this is what my income is. I mean, back in 08, 06, 05, right? Like, I saw people come in and say to their mortgage broker, they ask, well, I'm self-employed and I make $150,000 a year. Are you telling the
Okay.
truth? Yep. Okay. And that was it, right? Like, it was
Yeah.
scary. And that kind of stuff is what led to what, getting us in trouble, right? Along
Right.
with adjustable rate mortgages and the whole 9 yards. But now you can't get away with that. If you have a property that you want to, say, hold on to, and you're going to rent it, and then you're going to buy another property, you can't just tell the bank that, oh yeah, I'm going to rent it and have, $2,500 a month income. You have to actually show a history of that.
Absolutely.
You
It's
have to,
very different.
right? Like, I mean, it's much, much, more challenging. It's a lot more difficult.
And that's a good thing. And that's a good thing.
Absolutely.
And,
Absolutely.
the buyers, we always have a buyer consult before we get started, and we go over all of that, that they've saved up this money to buy a house, and even down to it's time until you close to go on a financial diet. No big purchases, no changes to your profile. Let's just, get this one thing done.
Financial diet. I like that.
Yeah. So they,
I need to go on a real diet.
it's certainly a challenge, but well worth it, because owning a home is the cornerstone of anybody's financial security, for their wealth building, for their future. You've got a house you can sell if you decide to down the road, that you're going to move on to something else and make money on it. You've
Yep.
got the equity that you've built up. If you're staying in a rental situation, all you have at the end of the day are rent receipts, and they're not worth very much.
Nope.
So,
Nope. No, absolutely. Absolutely. I wanted to I'm just going to check so we can just, stay on task. And we talked about so much. We were talking forever yesterday, and I'm like, oh, I'm going to have to write this down and make notes so we don't forget. And I know we had talked about, in terms of like first time home buyers and their, the concern, and I think to a certain degree, I think first time home buyers are still, their parents are scarred because of the '08, collapse. And, maybe there's some fear there in terms of, getting in over your head and getting into, over leveraged and things like that. And, we had talked about, there's that appreciation factor, but there's also, we touched on this yesterday when we were talking, is, the cost of renting, and that's a real big thing, is a real, a very real reality, I guess. The cost of renting versus the cost of ownership, and what the real cost is. And so I guess what I'm saying is, somebody who's renting for $2,000 a month, $1,500 a month, right? And they just, it says, you know what, I'm going to wait, I'm going to save up some more money, or I'm going to wait and see what the market does. And, say they're paying $2,000 a month, say they're paying $1,000 a month rent. A year from now, $12,000 down the toilet.
right.
Down the toilet. In the meantime, housing prices have appreciated 5%, 8%, 10%, right? So the house they could have bought now is now going to cost them potentially $40,000 more. So now, not only do they have less money, they've lost $12,000, but now they're paying 40 grand more for the same house.
Yeah, and you could look at it the other way. 12,000 they've lost in rent, and 40,000 they've lost in equity they could have had if they purchased earlier.
Right.
So that's a lot of money. Plus, if you factor in the cost of rent as compared to their monthly mortgage payment, to remember that the tax deductions involved in home ownership that you don't have in a rental,
Right.
that is another factor. So there's so many reasons why home ownership is better than renting, and so many reasons why, in spite of the difficult market, in spite of the challenges that a buyer has to face, it's important to really try to get it done.
Yeah, and I have a screen up here, a slide up here that I had I had posted on excuse me, Instagram, a couple weeks ago, and I just think it's very, impactful
Yeah,
because of the fact that, I don't think that these estimation for appreciation numbers are unrealistic at
no,
all, right? Matter of fact, Zillow came out this morning and with an article saying that their original prediction of 6 to 7% appreciation this year, they've just as of this morning they changed it to 16%. appreciation, which is just, I don't think that's I don't think that that's unlikely. You know what I'm saying?
Mhm.
But this 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 graph, like, just shows you, I mean, 1 year, if they had bought last year, right now they'd be sitting on $41,000 in equity if they had bought last year. So, okay, so you can't do anything about last year. So do something this year, because
Right.
this year, for certain, with the way things are going, for certain, even if the market collapsed in 2023, you have all of this year for appreciation. Um, which I think is, I think it was very, very, interesting and telling. And then there's the other, there's the other component of, that we had talked about yesterday, tax deductions,
Right.
and the fact that, that's one thing that I have a conversation with my first time home buyers a lot with, is the fact that a lot of them don't realize that you have a tax deduction at the end of the year. All your interest that you pay on your mortgage is tax deductible. So not only are you locked in, you're 30-year fixed, you're hedging against inflation. You don't have to worry about your rent going up, right? But now you've got this extra amount of money, $2, $3, $4, $5,000 right into your tax return that you didn't have before, just because you're a homeowner paying interest on a mortgage.
And your property taxes are also a deduction.
And your property taxes.
So, and once you purchase a home, your principal and interest payment will remain the same for 30 years. Your property taxes may go up a bit, but your principal and interest will remain the same, which is not the case of rent.
Yep.
Once your lease is up, your landlord can come and say he's raising your rent, or can tell you he's not renewing your lease because he's needing your apartment, or he's putting the house on the market and the people buying it don't want the units to be empty or whatever. So there's not the security in rent that there is in owning your own home.
Absolutely. Absolutely. This is that that article that I came across this morning, Joyce, with the home prices, and they had go on to excuse me, they go on to say that as of December, that the home listing site had predicted that the values would rise 11%, which is actually, pretty aggressive. But they've now, based on the new data in January, they're predicting that to spike to 16.4%.
Right.
And I don't think that this is, I don't think that this is, unusual. I don't think it's, outlandish. I think it kind of supports everything that we're talking about.
Definitely.
Absolutely.
And Case Shiller and CoreLogic is good place for them to be pulling the data from.
Yeah, I had actually, speaking of which, I have another slide on that as well. Let's see if I can pull that up here. Yeah, this is actually, and this slide is actually from it's from December, because they haven't updated this as of yet. And so these numbers are I mean, the thing that I would want to emphasize is, in terms of like whether you should buy now or wait, all of these numbers are in the positive, right?
Right. The
So
bottom line is they're going to increase.
they're going to increase. So even NAR, National Association of Realtors, 2.8%, super conservative. Super conservative. That still means if you buy now, next year, this time, your property will have appreciated 2.8%. I firmly believe, based on what we're seeing, based on the demand, Plymouth is, I checked this morning, and, typically single family homes, we usually average around, anywhere around, 150, 350 homes on average on the market at any given time. And as of this morning, there were 38.
Wow.
Um,
And in
and
our
that,
county, we should have between 3,000 and 3,500 to be a balanced market. and this morning we had 340. So it's just so low, the lowest I've ever seen in 25 years.
It's crazy. Absolutely crazy. We do have a question from T, who is here from Florida and originally from Easton. And the question is just asking about over 55 communities without high fees in your area. I don't know about you, Joyce, but over 55 communities, or any type of like HOA type communities, the fees for certain over the years, just with appreciation and the cost of running these communities has inched up, right? Because these communities are based on you own the property, but you don't own the land that the property sits on, right? So the land that it sits on, that continues to, that the property taxes continually rise on that particular, on that land. So when the property taxes rise, your fees increase. And then in certain communities, the communities themselves, if they have pools and things like that, insurance costs go up, maintenance costs go up. So I know that, back, I think we got in the business around the same time, Joyce. I got in about 96. Was there?
I'm 97.
Okay, perfect. So back, I hate to sound like, we're aging here, but back in the day, right?
Days.
Back in the old days, like, you could get into a 55 plus community and pay $200 a month. That doesn't, in my area, it doesn't exist. It's all, I think we have one co-op area in Carver, South Meadow Village. But most of them are traditional HOAs where you're going to be paying $500-$600 a month. So do you have that type of, is it the same type of
situation? The HOA fees are, $500, $600, $700, but they may include your heat. They also, the property taxes are generally much lower, so it balances out. But yeah.
Do you have a lot of those types of communities? Like, I mean, are they a rarity, or are they plentiful?
Or in my town, there's quite a few different complexes, and a few in the city.
Say again?
And there's a few in the city.
Right. That's because you're only 15 minutes away from Buffalo.
Right.
Perfect. So, let's see. So where were we? Thank you for that question, Dee. So, lost my train of thought. So I think that let's talk about mortgages. Okay. So the mortgage, I've heard a lot of conversation with with buyers, a lot of hubbub in the industry with the rates going up, and that possibly having a negative impact on the market. And I've heard some people say, "Oh, the rates are going to go up, and the rates are going to cause the market to stall. The rates are going to, when the rates go up, the buyers are going to pull back, and they're not going to, they're going to, keep buyers from buying." And I would adamantly disagree with that. I think that for certain, and I'm sure you agree, Joyce, like for certain, the interest rates, the market segment that's going to be the most negatively impacted with rates rising, and rates are going to rise. Matter of fact, I have the latest mortgage rate projections for you to look at here. And they're not going to go up to like 18%. Like when we moved to Plymouth, my parents bought we moved here in the early mid 80s. Interest rates were up at like 18%.
And people were still buying houses.
Excuse me, because they needed a place to live.
Our first house was 10.5%.
See, there you go.
If the rates increase, what are they going to be, like 4? So It's not a crisis, really. It's
No, and I think that
historically low and extremely affordable.
extremely affordable, and the projections right now, I mean, you look at what on average between Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae and the Mortgage Bankers Association, National Association of Realtors, like you're talking, you know, between first quarter 3.3 up to 3.7. This is not astronomical.
No, no.
Do you know what I mean? This is not end of world going up 10%. This is not going to stop anyone from buying a house.
No, absolutely not.
Right? Like, if someone needs to buy a house, excuse me. If someone needs to buy a house, they're going to buy. Now, will it affect how much they spend on the house and how much they can buy? Well, yeah, of course. And for certain, like the first-time home buyers, there will be first-time home buyers that will be priced out of the market, right? Like that's an unfortunate casualty of what could happen this year. Excuse me. As I get into a coughing fit here. Yeah, I love winter.
But that brings into the importance of a buyer really having a pulse on what their budget is, what they can afford, just exactly what their overall plans are for their money. So that is a critical thing. And to be
Absolutely.
ready, so that they are ready not only to get the house, but then to take care of the house once they're in there.
Right.
To have a cushion should the roof need to be replaced, or windows, or do they need to redo something? So, or there's some plumbing issue, whatever. They need to be ready for those things that may happen.
Right. Right. And I think that's that. I mean, you hit on a key point in terms of trying to figure out, financing and affordability, and one of the things for sure, like is when I'm sitting down with a new buyer, the first thing I ask is, do you have a budget? Do you have a handle on what your expenses are? Well, how much is your mortgage pay? How much is your car payment and your food bill and your cable and your streaming service and all that stuff? You need to know what is coming in and what is going out before you can even determine, like, how do you determine what you can afford in a mortgage payment if you don't know how much you can spend on a mortgage payment?
Right.
Right? Like it's just, so I think it's critical to do that. But these interest rates, the interest rates are not going to they're not going to change. They're not going to affect how the market is, and it's not going to slow the market. It'll change the market. And for certain, I think we might see a little bit of softening in terms of, I've kind of seen it, and maybe, not necessarily because of the mortgage interest rates, but, the pace of the market has changed a little bit, so that like a year ago, we would have 10, 20, 30 offers on a property. And we're not seeing that right now. But,
No,
we're definitely seeing multiple offers, and we're definitely seeing over asking, but it's not as frantic
exactly.
which is good, because I don't, I welcome that. I don't, for all those things. Oh, real estate agents must love this, crazy. No, hate it. you know, um, one of the things I wanted to kind of talk about is, buying, getting into the market, and like, okay, so should you buy? Is now a good time? Well, according to the market, yes, it's a good time. Is it a good time for a buyer themselves? Well, they have to determine that based on their own personal situation. So if they decide it's the time to buy, like what should a buyer expect heading into this market, right? And I think that one of the things that I always tell people, I've been like a broken record this past year, is patience, resilience, And
Solid pre-approval.
get a pre-approval and don't get sucked up in the craziness. I had a conversation with a client earlier today, and I says, and I always tell my clients, like, you pay what you think the house is worth.
Mm-hmm.
If it's meant to be, it will be. Don't get crazy. I personally don't think anyone should waive a home inspection unless you're in a financial position to handle that. And in other words, like if somebody's coming in, excuse me, they're coming in, they're planning to renovate the property. They have the cash and the reserves to handle if the furnace breaks, if the plumbing needs to be done, if all of a sudden you need new windows or floors or whatever. Financially, you can handle whatever comes your way and you're willing to accept that. I think that's the only time that you can say, okay, you know what? I'm going to buy it regardless of what a home inspection would reveal. I'm going to buy it.
And another way to face the home inspection when in a competitive offer situation is to talk to the buyer to see how much they would take on in repairs. So say they would take on repairs up to $5,000.
Right.
So you can put that in the contract, at least here we can, that the buyer will accept responsibility for any repairs up to $5,000. So that, takes all those little piddly things off the table for the seller, makes them more comfortable, but still protects the buyer for huge expenses like the roof or mold in the attic or, different things that we can't see. They take the cover off the electric service box and it's all rusty inside. Well, we don't take the cover off the box when we look at the house. So different things, it protects them from the big things. And then to top that off with a home warranty, which here we have a product that at the time the offer is signed by the seller, the home warranty goes in effect for the seller up until closing and then for 13 months for the buyer. And it covers all the major components of the home and gives them that security. But certainly don't waive the home inspection because you want your offer accepted. That's a very risky move. So if it's competitive, you can put in what you're comfortable with as far as repairs go and, just protect yourself from the big things if you want to do that. But home inspections are very important. And the other thing for sellers, if the buyer waives the home inspection, okay, we sign the contract, they go through all the process. Here it takes 60 days to close. Yesterday I had a closing, it's almost 90 days, but the buyer comes for the final walkthrough. They haven't had a home inspection. So guess what they're going to do at the final walkthrough?
Right.
They're
Right.
gonna look for everything. Oh, I don't remember this being here when I saw the house. Or, where are the thermostats? Where are the heating zones? They'll have a million questions and they'll be looking to make sure they didn't miss anything or that there's not anything wrong. And, that can cause a problem at the time when you don't want it right before closing.
Yeah, I think you bring up a great point because, like, the sellers, it's a mistake for the sellers to think that they're truly, untouchable.
Right.
That you know what, you have a cash buyer or a buyer that waives a home inspection, and once they're locked in, nothing can happen. The transaction is bulletproof, and I'll just show up at the close and get my check. Like, stuff happens. I've heard stories of buyers exactly what you're talking about. They go to the home, they go to the final walkthrough. It's not what they're looking at. That's not what they thought, or they changed their mind. They got nervous, whatever, and they're walking away from $10,000, $15,000.
They've had 60 days to hear their relatives, their neighbors, their friends at work tell them different stories. So it's never a good move to waive the home inspection. Never.
No. And I would say, like, from a seller's perspective, I think from a buyer's perspective, especially heading into 2022, 2021, there was a lot of that craziness, a lot
Right.
of crazy people were getting like that. It was again that frantic market, and all from what I'm hearing and seeing, the market is not going to be as frantic. It is going to be super competitive. It
Mm-hmm.
is still going to be above asking, short market time, low inventory. Like that's for certain what's going to happen this year. But that frantic nature of, I'm going to waive everything because otherwise I'll never get my foot in the door. I think we're seeing less of that. I think people are putting the brakes on, and I think it's a good thing. I
Yeah,
think it's a good thing because, our job is to get people in homes, right? But to do it responsibly, and
exactly.
right, and do it responsibly in the sense that, and you and I subscribe to the same philosophy. Like, it's never about the transaction;
No,
it's about the relationship and the family and the person. And the last thing, and I tell my clients, and I know you do as well, the last thing I want is 6 months, a year, 2 years from after the closing to get a phone call, or I call them and find out they're miserable,
right.
and it didn't work out because because they made these mistakes that could have been avoided. Now sometimes
Right.
that happens, right? But we try our hardest to keep emotions in check, to try to make the right decision. And it's just to have that craziness, that element out of the equation a little bit this year, I think is give you some breathing room. I think we're going to see breathing room with buyers this year.
I
you
hope so.
know I have a client that looked at a property this afternoon, um went on the market 2 days ago. It's still in the market. You know what I mean? Like, case in point, last year this time, that house would have been sold the same day.
Oh gosh, here what's happening is if a house goes on the market today, it'll be in the comments that showings begin today, offers will be heard, offers, if any, will be heard next Friday at such and such a time. So you've got time to see the house and that to get your act together.
Right,
So
right.
you
I
know,
think on that point, though, I think just as a word of caution to the buyers, though, buyers in Massachusetts, anyways, buyers still reserve the right. Excuse me, sellers reserve the right always to accept an offer at any time. So there's like sometimes a false sense of security. It's like morally and ethically when a seller says we're not accepting an offer until Friday, you hope that they follow through with that, but there's nothing legally saying that they have to wait until Friday, right?
and here that they sign a form, and that cannot be changed once it's in the system. So you cannot sell it sooner once you put that date in.
Really?
Yeah.
That's interesting. I wish it were that way here because oftentimes, if say a house will hit the market they start showing it on Sunday, and they say in the listing, it'll say highest and best offer due by, Tuesday or Wednesday. Sometimes there'll be verbiage right in the listing that says the seller reserves the right to accept an offer at any time.
Wow.
But sometimes, and this doesn't happen, it's not a common thing, but I absolutely have seen it happen where they say, okay, highest and best due by Wednesday, but if the seller gets a killer offer on Monday,
Don't want to lose it.
they're
Yeah.
going to take it.
Interesting.
And so, whenever I would say that, yes, the frantic is not going to be there. However, if a buyer sees a property, they've done their homework, they've done their budget, they've been pre-approved, they're comfortable in what they're willing to offer in terms of, it fits in their budget, and it's the number makes sense, the condition of the home makes sense, right? I'm not a home inspector, but I think I tallied it up. I've been through like 500 or 600 home inspections over my career. Like, when I walk through, that's one of the things I kind of, you know what I'm saying? I tell people transparently, like, hey, there are cracks in the tile. Hey, there's a crack in the foundation. I'm not a structural engineer, but You should probably get that checked out, right?
We know the red flags.
We know the red flags. That's exactly right. And so if you check all those boxes and you know that you want to put the offer in on Monday, don't wait till Wednesday.
Right.
Put the offer in on Monday, because you just never know. Your offer might be the one offer, and maybe it sits on the table for 2 days, but at least it's there and it's first in line. The other thing too is our area, we are still seeing a lot of escalation clauses. Do you guys do escalation clauses?
Sometimes it's not. It's up to the seller if they will accept them. Most of the time, they're not accepted. That they're not part of the transaction. Once in a while, we see them.
Okay, it's pretty common. It's more common here, and an escalation clause is basically it's a clause that you attach to the offer that essentially escalates the price that you're willing to pay for the offer. So for the property. So for example, you put an offer in at $350, and with an escalation clause up to $400. And what that'll basically do is it'll automatically increase that offer to, and you set an amount. So say it's $1,000 over highest offer with a cap of 400. So what it'll do is it will increase the price to automatically, without you even doing anything. It'll automatically increase the price to $1,000 over the highest offering price until it reaches the cap. And Joyce, I've used it. I actually helped a buyer win an offer a couple weeks ago using it. I wouldn't say we use it on every offer. Sometimes it's in the best interest of the buyer just to go in at the highest price that they can afford and be done with it, right? Some buyers just don't have that wiggle room to be able to have that escalation clause. So it's not something that a buyer should plan on doing on every offer, but it's definitely, I think, a good tool in the toolbox, to just.
We see them once in a while, and on my listings, if someone wants to put an escalation clause in there, I say, why not? So, yeah.
Absolutely. So there was one other article that was actually published by Hauser just a couple days ago, which I thought was interesting, that kind of just fit what we were talking about today. And the title, the article is titled, should I buy a house in 2020 answer 2022? And the answer is yes. And it goes on to say, just because the market feels crazy, it doesn't mean that it's peaked. They actually talked about what we had talked about earlier in our conversation about the similarities or lack of similarities between the housing crash in 2007 and how different it was compared to now, and how, in 2022, everyone is very highly qualified, in terms of their mortgage financing, and that we don't have, a real estate bubble, that we simply just don't have enough homes to match the growing population, which kind of lends itself to all of these millennials coming in the market that want to buy a house. There's just too many people. They had an excerpt from somebody that posted on Twitter. He says, "I'm waiting for the housing market to crash so I can buy my house." And then it says, "This tweet will age well in about 3 years when I have my home."
There you go.
I thought that was interesting. So, yeah, it's just, I think that, I think it's important, especially with the talk of, inflation and the cost of everything going up, and interest rates are going up, and it's always like, that's just the way it is, right? Everything always appreciates. The best way to hedge against inflation is by owning a home.
That's right.
Like you buy into a house and say, I was talking with my first time home buyers a couple weeks ago, and we were talking about that, and she's, nervous about it. And I says, well, look at it this way, the mortgage payment might be a little stretch, right? Might be a little bit of a stretch now,
Right.
but it'll never change.
Right.
Your income, if you stay in the same field of, same business, typically you get raises. Typically there's advancement throughout your life, right? And your income gradually increases. Your mortgage payment stays the same. You're sitting in a rental. How many stories have you seen, Joyce, with people that are lifelong renters? Like there's tons of stories, right? Of people that are lifelong renters for a long time. And then the seller decides, the landlord says, I want to take advantage of this real estate market. You've got 30 days to move out.
Right. Right.
And in the meantime, they maybe were getting a little bit of a break on their rent because the real estate, the landlord was a nice guy, yada, yada, yada. Well, guess what? Now they're getting asked to leave and now they have to pay market rent and they've got nothing to show for it.
Right. It's a shame.
It's a
It's a
total
shame
shame. It's
situation.
it's it's heartbreaking. And you know, you know, we were talking about this earlier in terms of, our mutual belief in housing. And if the last 2 years haven't shown us anything, it's the importance of housing. And I mean, gosh, there's with COVID, that was probably the most valuable thing that any of us had was having a home that we could shelter in, right? The
Hmm.
home that was comfortable and,
A
you
home
know,
that we could work from.
it's a home that you can work. Yeah, absolutely. Which is a whole nother market segment, right? People wanting bigger homes or home offices and whatnot. But, to have that piece of security, um, everyone deserves it. I know we both work hard to try to make that a reality. And for some people it's now, sometimes it's later, but I think the important thing is it's worth the fight. Even if you have to buy into a house that's smaller than you really want, even if you have to get into a condo instead of a single family to just get your foot in the door, even if you have to buy into a neighborhood that you're like, this wasn't my first pick, like even if you have just to and mostly I'm talking about the first time home buyers, right? you know I think it's worth the stretch and it's worth the struggle to reach to get that to get your foot in the door, right?
Right. It's worth having adjusting your expectations.
Yes, yes.
And it doesn't have to be perfect right off the bat, which a lot of my buyers are looking, well, it doesn't have this or it doesn't have that. Well, you can move in here. It's clean, it's livable, and as you go on, you can do things to your liking and fix it the way you want it. But you've got it. So there's a lot to be said for that.
Yeah, it's interesting. Fun. I mean, when I remember when I bought my first place, which was a condo, which was a townhouse, right? That it was. Oh, I wanted a single family home, but I couldn't afford it, so that's what I got. And we bought this place that had a tenant in it. They were not clean tenants. Place needed to be like it smelled and it was dirty and the whole 9 yards. But I saw past it because it was in my budget, right? And we got our foot in the door and we just started to slowly do updates and took the old carpet out and didn't do a ton, but just made it, improved it. And I think it was in about 4 or 5 years there, sold it, had a nice down payment for the next house. Okay, and the next house was not this 2,500 square foot 2-car garage house, which seems like that's the expectation of
Right,
a lot of
right.
first time home buyers nowadays. The house we got into needed a ton of work. Needed a ton of work, but it was in the right location and it had a garage. And so, it took us like 15 years to get to where we finally were like, okay, it's finally the windows are done and the floors are done and the siding is done and yada yada. But we were willing to put the time in.
And
And
that's it.
I
And
think,
this
that's a lost, like you can't I think the thing that people need to, the first-time homebuyers need to remember is that, for at risk of sounding preachy, but like, you're not going to buy your parents' house as your first house,
Right.
right? Like, a lot of these, they go to get in and they want to get right to the, right,
The
right,
finish line, right
yeah.
to the finish line.
And I think being realistic and making that sacrifice, especially in a market like this, is important to keep everything in a perspective.
Sure. And it isn't called sweat equity for nothing.
Yes.
So
Thank you. Thank you. Absolutely. Now I'm just going through my notes here, Joyce. Was there anything else that we wanted to talk about? I think we hit on a lot of the important stuff in terms of addressing the question about, I think it's clear whether, the answer to the question is, do you buy now or wait? And I think the clear answer is, if the buyer is ready, then yes, they should buy now. Right? Like, in terms of looking at the market conditions, if you're which is, I always tell people, I get the question all the time, right? Is it a good time to buy? Is it a good time to sell? Should I sell and buy? The question is who cares about what the market's doing?
right. What are you ready to do?
What are you ready to do?
Right.
And if someone is ready to buy, if somebody's ready to sell and then buy, if it's the timing is right for you and your family,
Right. Right.
there is no reason whatsoever in this coming year why they shouldn't do it.
And those that are wanting to sell and then buy, if the house isn't there that they need to go to, they don't need to accept an offer.
Right.
They're not going to be homeless. All those decisions are up to them, what happens. What buyers can do to get themselves ready is to continue to save money,
Mhm.
to get a pre-approval, not a pre-qualification, a pre-approval from a local lender or a local bank. That's tremendous, because here, a pre-approval from a local bank or one of our mortgage brokers that's respected in our area is like cash on the table. Okay. So you've got that. And to continue to save money and maybe look at what your expectations are, and maybe consider, okay, like you said, it's not going to be the perfect house, but what am I willing to do? How much am I willing to do?
Right.
Am I willing to paint? Am I willing to clean, change carpet? But I'm not in a position to be redoing bathrooms or kitchens or things like that. So, to just know where they stand, what their abilities are, and to just keep working at getting an offer accepted, and to work with an experienced realtor who can do things differently to make their offer stand out. I think what you did with the video the other day
Oh, yes. Yes.
was golden. That was golden, to do things that the others are not doing. And there's a lot of realtors that are just new in the business that, are trying to take advantage of this hot market, that will just email an offer over to the listing agent. You need to make yours stand out. You need to make yours, to make it be the cream that rises to the top.
Yeah, and so for those watching, so what Joyce is referring to is, what I typically will do as a regular practice is, when I have a buyer submitting an offer, we put everything together orderly on an email, and a lot of agents will just send the email over. Some will give some information, some will give no information, but what I will do is, I'll not only put a very detailed bullet list, but I embed a video in the email, and I'm talking directly to the seller. So I do a video explaining all the components of the buyer, not giving any personal information,
Right.
showing our hands, so to speak, but just going through all the factual information that the seller would need to know in order to make an educated decision about this particular buyer. And they're hearing it in my voice. They're hearing it in my words. They're hearing all that. I'm conveying all the details that I want to, and it's not being filtered by the seller's agent. Because once I send it to the seller, I ask the seller, excuse me, the seller's agent, I ask the seller's agent, please send this whole email to the seller. And my client that I had a couple weeks ago, I did that multiple offer situation. I talked to the agent afterwards, and she said the sellers were ready to accept the offer. Our offer was the first one to the table, even though it was multiple offers. They waited. They had a deadline. There were 5 or 6 other offers. There was an offer that was higher than ours, and the sellers said out of the gate they were ready to accept my offer right away. They were ready to set, because they said, well, we don't have any questions. Jen already explained everything. And I think that was huge. That was the best, like back in the day.
Right. When we did it in person.
You would do it in person. When I first got in the business, that's one of the things they train you is
exactly.
You go in and you sit in front of the sellers at the kitchen table, and you wait in line, go in the house, you sit down with them, and you explain, and they say, okay. And then you go out your car and you wait in the car to see if they want to call you back in for more questions, whatever. That obviously is not happening anymore. The market's changed.
Something else to mention to people watching, a practice that we used to have until recently is what they call love letters.
Oh, yes.
Where a buyer or a realtor would say, my buyers have 3 children. They love your yard. They can see their Christmas tree in your big front picture window. We can't say any of that. Include pictures of this lovely, cute little family. That was stopped because it violates the fair housing guidelines. So we cannot do that. That is not a fair practice. All we can do is speak to the strength of the buyer, the qualities of the buyer as far as their employment history, their motivation, their pre-approval. We can't speak to anything emotional, tearing at the heartstrings.
Right.
I know I still have buyers asking me, well, can I write a letter? And I have to explain to them, no, that is no longer acceptable across the country.
Yeah, it's a touchy subject. I mean, in Massachusetts, it's not, we can do it. We can present it, if the seller is willing to entertain it. But it's a very, very touchy subject, because it just, you're flirting with that line of discrimination. And it's tough. I mean, I had a situation a couple months ago where we had multiple offers and multiple buyer love letters, right? And letters to the seller, and one of the things I do is I put together a spreadsheet for the seller and help them, because every offer that's coming in is a different format and a different, it can be, information overload. So I put it in a spreadsheet so they can, we go over it together, and just the facts, ma'am, just the facts, right? We just go through, the black and white facts, and we narrow down the list. And then once we narrowed down the list, it was down to 2 buyers. And then the seller said, okay, we'd like to look at the love letter, like at that point. And actually the love letter, they said, oh my gosh, these people were buying this as their starter home, which was this was the seller's starter home, and they want to have a family, and this was the seller's. It was like so many different things aligned. It was like, this is exactly the way they connected with the buyers, and that was one of the reasons. Now, would they have accepted that offer if the love letter wasn't there? I think they would have anyways. I think the offer was definitely stronger in all the important ways. But from the seller's perspective, they connected. But it's careful, because with the love letters, there's no format and guidance. And you could easily put, if you have a buyer that's doing it, they don't know what to put in that could potentially put them at risk for violation of fair housing. Like they just don't know. They're just writing this, what seems like a innocent letter to the seller. And it can be a little sketchy because if they put this letter forward to the seller reads it and was like, I really don't want dogs in my house, even though they haven't checked out of the house yet.
Right. It's not your house.
It's not your house.
It's,
You
you
know?
have to just be very careful. So,
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I think, was there anything else you wanted to talk about, Joyce? I think we're.
I just think that all you buyers out there, don't give up. Don't get discouraged. It just makes it more sweeter when you finally do get that call that your offer's been accepted. So
Yeah, and it could be for, you could get lucky and get it accepted on the first try, which happens.
mhm.
It could be 4, 5, 6, 7 or more times, but nothing, all the things, nothing good comes easy, as my grandmother used to say. Like, if it were easy, everybody do it.
I had a couple last year, two or three transactions where we didn't get the offer accepted. And then a week or so later, I got a call, is your buyer still interested? The first buyer dropped out. So that happens too, that with this frenzy and
Yes.
this excitement, it's
Well,
it's not over till it's over.
you bring up a great point, and I'm glad you touched on that before we go off air here, because that kind of lends back to the financing and how tight things are now, which differs from 2008, 2007. The lending requirements are tough to the point where, buyers are losing financing.
Right.
Buyers are losing financing. If all of a sudden they, and you and I have talked about this, like, don't buy anything. Don't buy any furniture. Don't make any major purchases. Don't buy a car. Just don't buy anything. And they don't listen to us. And all of a sudden their credit reports changed, or they didn't report their income correctly, or, think of a million different reasons. And then the lender says, you know what? The rates have changed. Maybe the buyer was marginal, right, on the cusp of being able to afford the house, and then the rates changed, and now they could no longer afford the house. Guess what?
Or they bid over by so much that they no longer have the down payment they need for their type of mortgage.
Right.
Because as the house price goes up, so does the amount of down payment that you need. So just a lot of factors. So just don't give up. Keep trying. Find a reputable realtor, an experienced realtor to guide you through this, and you'll be happy that you did.
Absolutely. Well said, Joyce. Well said. Well, thank you for joining me on this, Joyce, and for those watching this at a later date, feel free to comment down below, ask your questions. For certain, I will be monitoring this, and if you have any questions for Joyce, she'll be monitoring this as well. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out. And Joyce, I've got your contact information over Howard Hanna Real Estate there out in your neck of the woods, in case anybody watching this has either people that are, they want to move out in your area, or they want to move from your area out to the Plymouth, South Shore, south of Boston area. Then they know where to find you.
Sounds like a plan. Thank you, Jen. Thank you so much.
All right. We'll talk to you soon. Joyce, don't go anywhere.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye now.